in one.
Welcome. Oh, wait, no mics. To the regular meeting, the Police Accountability Board. This is Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. Public notice: to access the meeting remotely, join from a Mac, PC, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using the URL in the public agenda package. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 826-5339-6072. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of the Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Brona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Brona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shellland, the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. With that, we'll proceed to the first item on the agenda. Roll call.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Echo. I'll now proceed with roll call. Chair Cayetano.
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson.
Here.
Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Leftwich.
Here.
Board Member Moore is absent. Board Member Moses.
Here.
And Board Member Williams received a leave of absence today. On behalf of the ODPA, I'd like to note that President, our Director, Aguilar, Data Analyst Ayman Lee, our Administrative Analyst Naya Brizan, and myself, Jose Murillo. On behalf of the VP, we have Deputy Chief Tate joining us virtually, and Lieutenant Rigo joining us here in our meeting space. On behalf of the City Attorney's Office, we have BCA Mattis. And on behalf of the City Manager's Office, today we have Deputy City Manager Terbalon, we have Assistant to the City Manager Peter Radu, and the Animal Care Services Manager Mike St. Pierre joining us remotely as well. With that, Chair, we do have a quorum.
Item 2 of the agenda, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, objections to items on the agenda? Hearing none.
I move that we approve the agenda. I second.
Now on to agenda item 3, public comment.
Thank you, Chair Cayetano. As a friendly reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. I will start with those who are here physically present before moving on to our virtual attendees. With that said, is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, I now move on to our virtual attendees. At this time, if you're attending virtually and would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand icon or press *9. Chair Cayetano, at this time, I see no hands raised.
With that, we go to agenda item 4, approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes. I second.
With that, we go to agenda item 5, ADPA staff report.
Okay.
Just to clarify, there are no objections, correct? Perfect, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members, colleagues, and members of the public. Welcome back. Wanted to give you some quick updates and then I'll provide an opportunity for the city manager's office to give us some updates if they have any, and then any questions you may have for us. So annual report mentioned, is underway. We're still doing a data reconciliation, data review. Our data analyst, in the back of the room, he's, working diligently on that. One of the things that's taken a little bit more time than we did last time was the reconciliation of the training records. So that is something that is required under the charter for the annual report, and it was missing from, and we indicated that at the last report, but this time we want to make sure that that's included. It is an important piece of this conversation. We also just wanted to provide a quick updates on different items of interest to the board. We had the opportunity, I had the opportunity with, talk to Dr. Nora Silver. She's a founder and faculty director of the Center for Social Sector Leadership. I don't know if you had that, link ready. Mr. Murillo is gonna put up the link while I talk, but, in essence, this, center within the university, they provide partnerships on a fee basis with different organizations or businesses that are interested. They have a business need, and they provide an interdisciplinary team that can work with the organization and roll out. So I had a preliminary conversation about our rollout of our social media in our outreach program, and we talked about ways this partnership could look like. They have graduate students that would be assigned with a faculty mentor and undergraduate student. So we talked about the work that we do here, and it seems like a viable path. We'll continue to explore it. If you note on the packet, we included the newsletter. That is for the month of January. It's our inaugural newsletter, so it'll continue to get better from here on out. But this is our commitment to update council, at least on a monthly basis, and the community members at large about the work that's being done by these bodies. And we also had the opportunity to launch our LinkedIn page. We promoted an event of interest for community members with the city manager's office. We mentioned last time the Black History Month event. We are still making sure we're updating that page, so we're in the early stages of its development. So, but it is live now. I'll also want to point to the packet. There was a letter that was received by the office, or was sent to the office from a concerned parent regarding an incident recently. It's my understanding, it's publicly reported the individual in that event has been arrested. But the community member parent wanted to bring this to the attention of the board and other city stakeholders. We have forwarded on to the chief and to the city manager's office as well. If you also note in the packet, you'll see flyers for focus groups. This is part of our policy review. We noted that we have seen a pattern of some complaints where older adults are indicating that their interactions with the Berkeley Police Department have fallen short of expectations. So we have a live policy review that is looking at these different interactions, and the focus groups will partner with our the North Berkeley Senior Center. We'll host them there. And it's also in a sort of pilot program for us as an office to see if we can incorporate these types of focus groups for our policy reviews. So once we finish that, we'll put it in the report, our results on that. Training and information, two quick notes on that. At the retreat, the chair wanted me to just gentle nudge about the annual NACO conference. To mention it is October 26th to the 30th, and it's going to be Minneapolis this year. And we were interested in bringing a big contingency like we did last year. I believe we had the biggest showing of different stakeholders of one community at the conference. Certainly, we had representation of different city departments, so that was, I think, a positive experience for us as a community. So if you are interested, again, we'll load it in the email, that we send after these, meetings, but please let us know. We do have budgetary constraints, unlike other years in that a lot of our salary savings are depleted, but it is our commitment to make sure that we bring as many, board members that are interested in attending. In a quick note, that I've mentioned a few times that we're in the process of procuring a scenario-based training system. It is on our way to us. We should be getting it in the next few weeks. It'll take some time for us to just make sure our office is acquainted with it. I, personally have been, trained on how to operate it, but I have to get a refresher, get reacquainted with it. But I just have a quick snippet here of what that training system is, and it's going to be available for board member training, staff training, and broader community training about police interactions. Mind the volume might be a little bit too loud. And is that shared for folks at home? Working on it.
It's getting the toughness and strength that are gonna make it apart. The relationship.
That's painful. Yeah, go ahead and pause it. We'll go ahead and forward you the link, but it was a 2-minute video that demonstrates the scenario-based training system. In essence, it allows individuals to interact and role play with these scenarios that officers are exposed to. Let's say it's a individual with a mental health issue. How do you navigate that scenario based on the policies of the department, based on the training? And it gives an opportunity to give some life to these policies and how they can play out in real time. It gives opportunity for us to have a conversation about it. So be on the lookout for that. And now I want to turn it over to our interim deputy city manager, Tasha Turbo, who's present with us today.
Thank you very much. I just want to reiterate, I just have one announcement, what the director mentioned on February 11th, the Black History Month celebration. It's hosted by our mental health department. And the request here is to please join our mental health division as they honor Black History Month on Tuesday, February 11th. The celebration will include African dance performance, speakers, food, resources, raffles, and more. The event is free and open to both staff and the community. You can see a flyer on our website under the events section of the website, and it's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. again on February 11th. We hope you join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chair, before I turn it over real quick for questions, I just wanted to special shout out. We have a guest among us, outside visitor, Professor Nick Lally. He's visiting from the University of Kentucky. He's associate professor of geography. He's studying police reform. He visited with our team, staff team. He's interested if he can get on the calendar some board members to talk about his research and about your experience with police reform. So he is present with us, and we appreciate the work that he's doing.
Any questions?
I have a question. Actually, a request. I wondered if staff could prepare a brief memo summarizing significant relevant laws that were enacted in 2024. I know in the past there've been attachment that we haven't discussed it, that references different bills, but I don't think there was ever anything that showed what laws were actually enacted.
Okay. And to be clear, enacted as it relates to police related, right?
Anything relevant and significant.
Yeah, we'll definitely compile that. We'll work with the police department, also the city attorney's office. I know they also monitor those legislative.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Is the director's office finished with their report with no questions?
Believe so.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item 6, chair and board member reports. My only report is that I talked to council members and the mayor's office after our retreat, where we discussed getting the board up to full staff. And I do have information that there will be one additional board member joining us probably at the next meeting. And there's another one who is in the system right now. So there's 2 additional coming. And the mayor's also committed to appointing a member soon. So I'm really appreciative of their work on that front. And anyone else? Board member reports? No babies born?
I did actually have that before. I did want to, regrettably, now that I hear that staff is coming, to let this board know that, this will be my last meeting. I loved my time on this board. I just cannot commit the amount of time that it deserves, and you deserve somebody sitting in this seat that can attend more subcommittees and be more involved than I have been able to be, so. I wanted to make sure that we maintain quorum, but if we have folks coming in, step aside. So, thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you, board member Moses, for your service. We really appreciate the time that you've committed so far, and we wish you the best of luck with all your endeavors, especially your new ventures.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other updates for us? Okay. With that, we'll move to number 7, the chief of police report. I believe Deputy Chief Hagan is here. Was that the representative?
Believe so.
Okay.
I am doing my best to get my camera to turn on. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. It's really nice to be here after being gone for a few months, so please bear with me as I'm actively trying to get up to speed on all of our current projects and our ongoing work. So that being said, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. Talking about cases of interest, there have been many cases of interest recently. A few I'd like to share that I feel have deeply touched not only our community, but also our first responders. A couple are crashes, and then I want to talk about the fire investigation that we assisted with. On the 26th of January, about 12:57 p.m., both police and fire responded to Ada and California Street for a vehicle that collided with a pedestrian. And when we arrived on scene, there was a female pedestrian that was trapped beneath the vehicle. Within a few minutes, the fire department personnel were able to extract her and immediately transport her to the hospital. Despite the life-saving efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. Our BPD fatal accident investigation team, we call them FATE for short, was called to the scene, and they're currently handling this investigation. There was also one that was reported in the news I wanted to elaborate on. A few days after this other collision, there was a 19-year-old UC Berkeley student who was riding an e-scooter on Blake and went into the intersection at Ellsworth and lost control and fell. He hit his head on the asphalt. Unfortunately, he was not wearing a helmet. And a couple people who witnessed it pulled him to the sidewalk and called 911. He was transported to the hospital and he remains in critical condition. His injuries were consistent with the fall, and our FATE team has taken over the investigation due to the fact that he's still in the ICU. And then on February 3rd, about 4:35 in the morning, both police and fire responded to the 1000 block of Cedar Street regarding a structure fire. Fire arrived first and found 2 adults and a dog outside the residence, as well as 2 adults inside. Sadly, the dog died on scene. All 4 people were transported to the hospital, where 1 person was pronounced deceased a short time later. 1 person is in critical condition and the other were evaluated and released. The cause of that fire is still under investigation, but there are currently no signs of foul play. Excuse me. I share these cases because these tragedies impact not only the victims and their families, but also the first responders who bear the emotional and psychological weight of these incidents. I also wanted to highlight the collaboration that occurs across city departments after serious traffic safety incidents, as they lead to a better understanding of many factors leading to collisions, which lead to improved safety measures and prevention strategies in the future. By sharing the information and working together, we strive for safer streets and stronger support systems for everyone affected. Switching gears to give you a brief update on staffing. I know Captain Schofield let you know that we had an officer who was going to be graduating the academy. Happy to say that they did. And then we have another officer who is a lateral from San Jose PD. So those two just started field training this week. And for those of you who know Sergeant Ledoux, I'm happy to report that he's returning to BPD this week and bringing back his 18 years of experience. We also have 4 recruits in the academy, 2 more starting the Sheriff's Department Academy in March of 2025. And then a couple other items of interest, an update on the EIS contract. The City of Berkeley and Benchmark have signed the contract. There's one last administrative step, which is basically to put it in IRMA to process the payment before the implementation phase officially launches late next week. And the initial implementation is expected to take 4 to 6 months with a complete model in place by the end of the calendar year. I also wanted to acknowledge that the chief and I have received and had a preliminary conversation regarding the proposed policy submission process memorandum that was shared. I'm happy to provide a brief summary of the current KMS process, as well as members of the ODPA and the PAB who currently receive those notifications if it's helpful. But I don't want to get too in the weeds with that prior to your discussion. So with that, that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Deputy Chief State, did you want to stay around for our discussion? You'd be welcome to share during that agenda item. If you're not available, then we can save it for the next one.
I don't think I'm going to be available, but I'm happy to circle back and talk about it after you guys have had the time.
Okay. Board member questions for Deputy Chief State. Well, thank you for your time, Deputy Chief State, and welcome back. Look forward to talking next week.
Likewise, take care.
With that, we'll turn to subcommittee reports. Agenda item 8.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Cayetano. Before I begin, it's my understanding that there will be a couple subcommittees that the board would want to consolidate today.
At least one.
Okay, so I'll go ahead with the reporting, and as we get to that subcommittee, we'll take action there to consolidate it, or depending on what the board's decision is. So I'll start with the regulation subcommittees. Any updates?
Yes, we've been meeting regularly. We had 3 more meetings this, I'm sorry, we had 1 meeting on the 31st of January. That was a 3-hour meeting, and we have 3 more meetings coming this month and in early March, and 1 more in early March. And these meetings have been both city stakeholders by ourselves, and then with after that with the union reps. Progress is slow, but I guess steady. Board member Leffish, do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, I guess I was gonna just say that it's been very frustrating because it's incredibly slow. And I think a big part of that is turnover of key players, including our city negotiator, the negotiator for the police union. The police union president has changed 2 or 3 times. And then the deputy city attorney, James Chang, who was very involved, who's left. So that makes it slow because of the lack of continuity and the key players. So yeah, we're making progress, but it's been years.
Thank you. Fair and partial policing implementation.
No further report on that, although I understand there's going to be a presentation by the chair and vice chair before the public safety committee, correct?
Correct.
I missed that meeting.
Has the
That's
date-
why I read.
Has the date been confirmed though?
No, the
Okay.
date has not been confirmed yet.
Okay.
Surveillance technology policy,
Nothing.
okay. Policies and practices related to the downtown task force. If I may,
Please.
we still don't have a confirmed date for the presentation for that. We just know that the next meeting is gonna be in March. We're just uncertain if it'll be scheduled for that particular regular meeting or if there'll be an additional.
But that also needs to go before the public safety committee, correct?
That's correct. Okay. Conflict of interest subcommittee?
No, and my recollection is wrong, but I thought we had decided to, end that subcommittee. Is that right?
That was one of the
So
ones.
we can take that off the list,
Okay,
and if we need to, we can activate it.
okay. Could I have a second to that?
I'll second.
And are there any objections to that? Okay, so the conflict of interest subcommittee will be expanded. Policy review subcommittee?
The chair can provide the update on that one.
We have our agenda item, scheduled for today on section 125.17. So that's the first item. The second item is we have our, probably final meeting with the department next Tuesday. And we will be providing a full report to the board, the last meeting of February. And that's on the vehicle pursuit policy.
Okay. Budget and metrics?
I don't think I have an update. We did review some metrics for the board itself at our retreat on Saturday. But I think particularly in board public notices news that we should consolidate budget and metrics and operations and processes.
Okay. And just confirming for the record, that's a motion?
Yes.
And I'll second that.
Can you reiterate the motion, just for the record?
Yes, so the motion is to essentially combine the budget and metrics subcommittee with the operations and processes and consolidate it into one committee. And are there any objections to that motion? Okay. I'll now move on to the outreach and engagement. Board member Moore's absent. So there isn't any updates on that at this moment. I'll proceed with operations and processes, which has just been combined, but if there is any updates to that, okay.
Sorry, but do we need to take any action with respect to the outreach and engagement since?
We will at the next meeting,
Mhm.
when we have our full
Okay,
review of the.
okay.
Okay. And for the Berkeley Police Department policies, 1034. Neither of the committee members are here, so if it's okay with you, Chair, we can move on to our liaisons and policy complaint.
I think we were also missing the off-duty conduct one, which we needed to consolidate into the policy. Subcommittee as well.
I think we might have already done that. The reason for that was that we reviewed prior minutes and I believe it had been consolidated.
Okay.
So it's accounted within the policy reviews.
Okay.
Okay. Chair Cayetano, are there any updates regarding EIS beyond what we've heard today?
Meeting with Arlo on Friday to discuss the beginning of the implementation phase for the early intervention system, which, as the chief state said, would begin the end of next week. So stay tuned for that. I'm also glad to hear that the expected time to completion is this calendar year, which has been a goal since last year.
Thank you. For our policy reviews, I know one of them is being presented today.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Chair, it wasn't clear to me, so implementation of the EIS will begin next month,
Next week,
next week.
right, that's what she said.
Yeah, it seems really fast.
I don't understand, I thought that that our group would have input on what factors were being considered, and I don't understand at what stage we're at and how did it get to be here so fast.
So we can agendize it. It's not implemented as in we're installing an engine into a car. It's implemented as in like we are now contracted and beginning that stage of the process.
Oh, beginning the process
Yeah.
of, okay, so it's not implementation, it's, okay.
You
The
pick the,
concept is the next.
The contract is.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know what other word you would apply to that, this.
When I heard that, I thought it meant that auditing is starting and everything is going.
We're not at that stage. That's the stage that will happen at the end of the year.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. With our policy reviews. I know there's an item for the vice chair today. And board member Moore's absent today. So if there's nothing else, we could move on.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes.
Isn't board member Moore no longer on the board?
We sought clarification from the city clerk's office. Technically he's still a member of the board, and that's being processed.
Okay.
Okay, done with agenda item 8, now on to 9 new business. First up is discussion and action on the acquisition of fixed video surveillance cameras by the Berkeley Animal Care Services per Berkeley Municipal Code section 2.99.0302. Give it over to the director's office for their presentation.
Yes, and I see our counterpart, Mr. Radu, was present. I just wanted to make sure that I'm pointing to a brief update we provided or in our original memo, when we put out the agenda packet, we noted that there was gonna be an installation of these cameras. So we wanted to make sure that the record reflects that these aren't new cameras, they have cameras there, they're updating the server, but again, this proposal is going to be further clarified by Mr. Radu, who's present with us right now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Director, and good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. Appreciate the opportunity to be before you this evening. My name is Peter Radu. I am the manager of our Neighborhood Services Division, which includes our Animal Care Services unit. And with me this evening, I have Mike St. Pierre, who's our Animal Care Services Manager. And we are here to answer any questions that you may have. Before you this evening, as the director mentioned, is a use policy and acquisition report for the installation of a new software server to support an existing security camera system at the animal shelter at 1 Boulevard Drive in Berkeley. We recommend that you recommend approval of this acquisition and this use policy to the city council. I want to underscore, as the director mentioned, these are existing cameras that had been in use for many years until a recent software compatibility issue made the server obsolete, which necessitated its replacement. And in the intervening time since the camera system was last updated and addressed by staff with any sort of intervention, the city's surveillance technology ordinance was passed, which necessitated, of course, this process and the drafting of a use policy for the system. That's what's before you this evening. So you'll see in the use policy our proposed uses of the camera system, which again simply codify the way that these cameras have been used for many years. And these are first and foremost to support to protect and safeguard the animals in our care from theft or harm, to support specific and active law enforcement investigations, to support the enforcement of city policies and state and local laws, and to prevent deter, and identify individuals who intentionally abandon animals. We are really only interested in using these cameras for issues that are related to animal welfare or to the safety of our staff and volunteers. In addition to crimes against our animals that are routinely committed, and Mr. St. Pierre is here to provide more detail on that. We've also seen physical assaults against staff, including the manager, and violent threats against staff with weapons. We have regular encounters with the public where the conversation becomes very heated, where for worker or volunteer safety, the police have had to be called, including an incident that I myself witnessed at the animal shelter in the morning just 2 days ago. And we also had Schedule II drugs for veterinary purposes on site, and we've seen attempted thefts of those drugs. So obviously we have some significant security and staff safety concerns. I'll turn it over to our Animal Care Services Manager, Mike St. Pierre, to add any additional detail.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having us. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So as Peter said, mostly from our side, we are more concerned about the safety of our staff and volunteers and the animals here. Just in the past few weeks or in the past few months, I've been assaulted by an animal owner. We had a volunteer have the animal ripped from their arms by a person in the parking lot. 2 weeks ago, we had a man with a pickaxe follow around a volunteer in our parking lot with a dog. We found shotgun rounds on the side of the shelter just last week. Our previous manager in this position before me was assaulted in the lobby, and there had to be a restraining order against that individual. The cameras in that case were the reason why it went through. Myself, staff, and most volunteers have been threatened with violence by animal owners or people around the area. We had our cleaning person who comes in 3 times a week. She quit working here because of a person trying to get in and banging on the door multiple times and scaring her. And these are all just within the last few months. This has been going on for a while. And in addition to the staff and volunteer safety, we have animals being dumped outside, injured animals left being abandoned to die, in kennels, left exposed to prey into the weather. And then on top of that, it's also, like Peter said, we have Schedule II drugs in here. So we do have people breaking in, trying to get to the drugs on premise. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting. Does the director's office have anything more?
So one thing we just noted, there's no language about they do enumerate some entities or organizations, agencies that can have access to this. We don't foresee having a continuous need for these sort of surveillance records, but as was indicated, there were some police involvement in these incidents. So if we ever get a complaint, I'm confident that the language in the charter gives us the authority to request those records if appropriate. But I'd like for, when we're adopting these policies or updating them, that it reflects our authority so we can have that synergy. Because then we get into misunderstandings about what is we're not allowed for our review.
Before I turn it over, thank you very much for presenting and yes.
I just had a question. I'm really sorry to hear about all the violence and the problems at the facility. And I'm kind of surprised, and I'm just wondering why it is that I guess it's the animal owners are so upset. Is that the facility takes, and maybe you can just explain that, because that.
Yeah, no, these aren't owners that we're going out and taking their animals. Most of the time in incidents like this, it stems from the owner being arrested. And then we get the animals while they go to jail. When they get out of jail, they want their animals back no matter what. There's also municipal codes that require us to spay and neuter every animal that comes in here. And that gets a big pushback as well. You know, one of the people who came in was arrested the day before for assault with a deadly weapon, and then came here right after he got out of jail, and then caused an issue here. So it's usually with the animals who end up here from the owner being arrested or something happening prior to coming here.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add on to that, if I may, Commissioner, as Mike stated, I think the takeaway point here is that our staff at the animal care shelter are often in the position of making what are very emotional decisions for animals on behalf of animal owners, as outlined in state law and the municipal code regarding, again, very difficult decisions, including euthanasia, spay neuter, which a lot of owners are sometimes opposed to. And so that obviously can lead to heated and emotional responses and reactions from animal owners.
Right, thank you.
Other questions from the board?
Yeah, I was just surprised to see that this request is simply to replace the server, not to acquire the cameras. There was an indication that there was a determination made that still this was subject to the acquisition policy. So I'm just curious about that. I wouldn't typically think that replacing a component of a system would require you to go through this full process, nor do I think that's the best use of time. So I'm just wondering about that piece, if anyone could, maybe I read it wrong.
No, thank you. I appreciate that question. We consulted extensively with the city attorney's office on this and determined out of an abundance of caution that it was best to comply with the surveillance technology ordinance. Moreover, previous attempts to sort of catalog the inventory of security cameras at existing city facilities missed the animal shelter. As I mentioned, these are pre-existing camera systems, but in other acquisition reports and use policies for security cameras, the animal shelter was overlooked and not included. And so I think this is a good opportunity to not only address the need to update the software server, but to create a use policy for an existing city facility camera system that should have been codified in the first place.
So maybe, I guess my feedback is maybe it makes sense the first time if it's sort of a case of first impression for this board, meaning we've never reviewed or vetted the particular camera in question, that it would come. But going forward, I would not like to see us have to approve servers or component parts if we've already gone through the approval process. So I don't know if that requires an amendment to something that's existing, so that perhaps the city attorney's position could change. But if staff could just take note, I have a question: what would it take to have the city attorney feel that the replacement of component parts did not need to come before the PAB to require this process? That's a question I have. The second, sorry, but just with respect to the policy itself, there are many provisions in the policy. I'm assuming and hoping that those are standard provisions applicable to everywhere where we have cameras. Does anyone know the answer to that, as opposed to unique to this particular location? So I'm talking about, let me pull it up, just so people know what I'm talking about. Data collection, data access, data protection, civil liberties and rights, data retention. Those are all, they're standard.
I think that in the time that I've been here, like a year and a half, this is the first surveillance camera that has come before the board. So it was helpful for me to hear the report and see it. But I agree that a software update like this could have gone on a consent calendar, for example, if we do have one. I actually don't even know if we're able to have one per our standing rules, which is something that we should investigate, because this would have been a perfect example. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to present, so thoroughly and explain your situation to the board. I feel like you did so very effectively. Are there any board members who have a question for Mr. Ragu and Mr. St. Pierre?
I just add one comment that, it sounds like the combination of very emotionally invested individuals that are, coming to you in traumatic circumstances, combined with your, location at the end of university, all warrants the need for surveillance. But doesn't see, that seems necessary but not sufficient. I would just encourage you to continue down this road, look for other ways to keep your staff and team safe.
I make a motion
Yeah,
to the policy.
Do I hear a second?
That was second by Calvi. Okay. Are there any objections to that motion?
Take a look.
Oh, perfect. I'll start with. Sorry, just one moment. Chair Cayetano,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yeah.
Board Member Calavita,
yes,
Board Member Lefkovich,
Yes,
Board Member Moses.
Yes.
And Board Member Williams is absent, so it's Board Member Moore. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the
Yes.
opportunity.
Thank you.
thank you.
Could the director's office let us know when it's transmitted to council?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, next agenda item. Let me pull up this list here, excuse me. Presentation of policy review 2023 PR 0003 by Vice Chair Wilson.
All right, finally. Nearly 2 years later. So, this, policy review covers 3 distinct, topics, two of which are related. And you can see the summary of the findings and recommendations starting on page 3 of my report, page 46 of the PDF. So the first has to do with transparency around how calls are prioritized by the call takers and dispatch. The concern in the complaint was that there's a lack of transparency about how calls are prioritized. I'm recommending that the department begin publishing the ECAB list as an initial step towards greater transparency. It is true that there is no publicly available information about how calls are prioritized. The second aspect of the complaint is specific questions around whether or not there is any specific policy or practice regarding property crimes in progress. This relates to the question about call prioritization, because the underlying issue is, shouldn't a property crime in progress be afforded a high priority in terms of a call? So where you can see here in the report, there is no specific policy addressing property crimes in progress. I'm not recommending that the department be asked to drop one at this time, but again, as a minimum threshold initial step, that the department published its ECAB list. I will note that that's not going to fully satisfy the issues raised by the complainant, because the ECAB list does not make it explicitly clear how a property crime in progress would be prioritized. The third aspect of the complaint had to do with access to dispatch call transcripts. What I learned is that the department does not transcribe calls for service, nor is it required to. There is a procedure for requesting a recording, a copy of a call recording. I'm not recommending a policy change at this time in that regard. I do note that the complainant did request a call recording. It was not given to her, and it's not exactly clear that the basis cited for not giving it to her was in alignment with the policy. And this ties to an issue that's come up a few times with this board, which is how does the department respond to requests for public records? And so, if at some point we decide to take that on as a board, and perhaps it is warranted, this issue I think should be brought in. And again, you might consider a broader initiative around looking at public record, response to public record. So that's a summary of the report and my recommendations. The only other thing I'd say is that this board has reviewed on a couple of occasions the protocol or guidelines for conducting a policy review and initially drafted or initiated by Chair Cayetano and then subsequently worked on by Board Member Moses and myself. I tried to follow that in drafting this, so you can see references to comparable jurisdictions. You can see that I did reach out to the department, ask them to weigh in and review this report. I reached out to the complainant. Curious to see if there's any feedback about the structure or format of the report. I would say it's a tremendous amount of work to do this well. I tried to, I don't know if I hit the mark, that concludes my presentation.
Any questions from board members?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank you. I think it's an excellent report. Thank you. I know it was time consuming. I'm looking at this ECAD list, and I would think that property crimes in progress would be one of the, not the most common, but one of the most important things that the police do. And I don't see anything in this list that even mentions property crime. And so that strikes me as strange. And I'm wondering if you've had any feedback on that or any explanation. And it also, I mean, I basically agree with your recommendations. You've done the work. But again, it seems to me that property crimes in progress are probably one of the most important things that residents, that the residents would feel would be one of the most important police activities. And I'm wondering if there shouldn't be somewhere in some policy, something about responding to them. So those are basically two things. First is just your reaction to this absence of any reference to property crime in the ECAD list.
I was really surprised. And I didn't look at other jurisdictions' ECAB list, but I did look at policies, and I think I talked with this some time ago, but there's only one that has a policy covering this topic. So it didn't seem like Berkeley was out of line. That doesn't mean it's right, but I did note that. I wasn't looking so broadly at property crime because I knew that the underlying issue was the stolen car, vehicle theft in progress. Stolen vehicle is on the ECAB list, but not in progress. And so, I mean, I would be fine if we want to have a different recommendation, asking the department to clarify or perhaps modify the ECAB list, although I'm sure that presents a number of IT challenges. But I don't have a great explanation or answer for you.
So if there's not a specific separate standalone policy on this, but do you know if it's embedded in some other policy?
No, it's not.
That just seems odd to me. That, I mean, not that we should have a standalone policy, but that I would expect that it would be somewhere, since when you're having your catalytic converter stolen and you call the police, that's seems to me something citizens really expect an understanding of responses.
Would that be burglary or auto burglary? I see a burglary and auto burglary right in the middle left of page 53.
Yeah,
That's our yes.
maybe.
Yeah, which can be a priority 1 or a priority 3. It was interesting. I think somebody asked me in doing this, how would I have prioritize this particular policy complaint? When I got it, I didn't think it was going to be so complex, but then obviously if you're working through these issues, it is surprising. It's surprising as a resident that there is no transparency into how calls are prioritized. And there is a policy ostensibly around response to crime, but it is very focused on code 3, like very serious crime.
Yeah.
So everything else is, kind of silent.
I had a question. Oh,
Go ahead.
oh, okay.
I was gonna.
I see that you have this list of comparable jurisdictions, and this issue's come up several times, like which jurisdictions qualify. I was wondering how you happened upon this list.
I simply use the jurisdictions that were cited in the Citygate report. Because in what board member Moses, or I think it was board member Blackaby and I were working on, we recommended that we needed to just pick some. And those were ones that, Citygate had used. It's still an outstanding, question, but that's why I picked these.
Okay, thanks.
Before we take a motion, I also wanted to commend Vice Chair Wilson for your diligence in this process. At the retreat, Vice Chair on Saturday, Vice Chair Wilson mentioned that she met with the complainant, spoke to her, spoke to the department. And I thought that that was a good model for how a policy review should be conducted. And so it's really great to hear that she's also writing the protocols for how a policy review should be conducted as well. So maybe you can model it based off the review that you did. But thank you for your diligence in this. If there are no other comments, ask for a motion.
I move we accept these recommendations. That board member Wilson has made in her report.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'll proceed with roll call vote. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Lethbridge,
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Kayata.
Yes.
The motion carries.
And that brings us to 9D. Is that right? Let me just read the agenda item before you do it. I lost it. Discussion and action on the PAB's proposed, oh, here we go. No, we're on C. 2025 PAB strategic planning session recap and next steps. Excuse me. I believe the director's office has a presentation for us.
Yes, and Mr. Bonillo sent it out. Just a quick recap, we had a good discussion in the conference room. We identified the items that are mandatory and the ones that are permitted. And we created a calendar, so we're gonna be updating our notes, but this is just, we turned it around quickly within a few days, but just know we're gonna produce the work plan as established in the retreat. But we have it up there if we can start reviewing.
So some of the strategic goals, and these are summarized from the discussion from Saturday. One of the top priorities that the board discussed was generally increasing interest in the PAB's commission in the board member roles, particularly by advocating more and just overall increasing outreach to inform people about the police accountability board and what the job entails, along with our general community outreach. The second one was a focus on overseeing the early intervention system implementation. And then another one was to finalize the updated operations manual, just for the general moving forward with the board.
It's a good picture.
And then, of course, one of the big themes that was also discussed at the strategic planning session was to prioritize planning policy reviews, as well as overall expand our network for research supported purposes to further strengthen our reviews. And then, of course, one of the big themes over the last year has been completing or seeing through the review of our final regulations that our regulation subcommittee reported on earlier. The action items that came out of this, and there's 2 slides, there's quite a few. One was, of course, to finalize the PAB's mandatory duty calendar based on the charter and strategic planning timelines. The board provided us with the goals for the year in terms of when they wanted to have each specific item completed, as well as when they were required to. One is briefly mentioned in the last item by Vice Chair Wilson in terms of standardizing the policy review procedure for our reports moving forward, as well as organizing and prioritizing the policy practice and procedure reviews so that we address them in a timely manner and in terms of the priority with a categorization system to rank them having been discussed. We started the fourth one today in terms of consolidating subcommittees to align with the current staffing and volunteer realities of the board and our office. And then the fifth one is to notify the city council of the board's vacancies and the impact that our office had identified in terms of the complaint procedures. As the chair reported earlier, he's already started and gotten ahead since day one after our strategic planning session. The sixth is to further engage community stakeholders, and this goes back to the first goal / priority that we had, just to further encourage commissioner interest in our participation, just through increased outreach. Which leads us to number 7, which is to expand on our social media presence in the way that we interact with the community. That's our short slide.
Thank you. Are there any board member comments on our retreat, strategic planning session as we're calling it? Yeah.
Comment. I thought it was a very productive session. And then and thanks to staff for doing this recap. Just a couple of minor things I had on the memo. That first bullet, it says strengthening stakeholder engagement to achieve full PAB staffing. And I think membership would be a better word because we're not staff, that's on page 2. And then the other thing, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet, strengthen the PAB's academic network to enhance research capabilities and overall work product. I think what we discussed was broadening our network more generally it includes academics and enhancing our research capabilities, but also just to improve our overall effectiveness. I know we talked about outreach to other organizations who might be willing to do support letters for some of our policies. So I would just make that just a little broader, maybe strengthening that our outside network and then overall effectiveness rather than work product. But thank you for doing this. I think it's very helpful also to look back on, maybe in 6 months, it would be helpful for us to schedule a meeting where we take a look at this and whatever else you come up with and see where we are on the goals that we had outlined.
I have a question and a comment. I'm sorry to have to miss the retreat. Speaking about outreach and public engagement with the public, I'm wondering if it came up at all, discussion of our subcommittees and the absence of public members on our subcommittees, because I think it's really important. It's very striking at this point. We have no public members on our subcommittees.
We do, actually.
We have Kit Sagamore and Ron.
Yes. She's on the policies.
Right.
Yes.
Right. But we used to have at least one public member, sometimes 2, on almost all subcommittees unless it was confidential work.
Right.
And it sort of came to a halt when the former mayor said we needed to have a pool and, it became quite complex. And so we sort of, stopped doing that or something. But I think having public members on the subcommittees is one important way of increasing and encouraging outreach to the public in general. And I would really hope that we can go back to the tradition of having subcommittee public members of subcommittees. And this thing about having a large pool, we never did get a large pool of applicants. And so I think we need to talk this up in the community and see if we can't generate some interest.
It's a great suggestion. I think that it sort of coincides with the other suggestion, or one of the suggestions that came out of the retreat, which was to publicize open positions on the board. And to have them attend and to see our process, to maybe speak about their interests to us in order for us to inform council that there are interest members of the public.
Yeah.
And if there's a person in the community who has maybe less of a desire for a bigger time commitment, they could participate in a smaller manner. So that could go to staff for when we create these flyers, that it doesn't have to be just for board membership, but it could also be for subcommittee membership as well. And we'll be sure to touch base with the mayor's office to make sure that that requirement is not in place still, which I doubt it is, honestly. But we'll double check.
Okay.
Any other comments on the retreat? I'm calling it a retreat. It was here, right in this building right there.
Didn't go to a spa.
No, we didn't, unfortunately. Next time. Okay, I don't think there's any action I'm going to take on that, so I'm going to move forward. So number D, 9D, discussion and action on the PAB's proposed procedure for the BPD to submit all newly adopted and revised departmental policies to the PAB per section 125-17 of the Berkeley City Charter. And this is assigned to me, but I'm gonna ask Board Member Leftwich if she wants to give a brief context on our vehicle pursuit notification timeline, or you can kick it back to me.
I'll kick it back.
Okay, I wanted to give you the opportunity. So this is coming up. It came up in the middle of our policy discussions with the department, and we wanted to proactively request guidance from the city attorney's office on charter language that seemed to suggest that the chief had to notify the board of a newly adopted policy after implementation. And so we were not clear on what that meant, because our understanding to date was that we had never been notified of any policy by the chief. And so we wanted to make sure that we were in compliance with the charter, but also we wanted to make sure that we were keeping track, you know, of the changes that the department was making to its policies. And this became very acute in our vehicle pursuit negotiations with the department when we've been engaged in a conversation with them since last April, at least. And we heard maybe 3 weeks after the fact that they had implemented a policy. And it wasn't until our director had asked the chief, hey, is this policy implemented? And the chief, and like, does this count as notification? Like, did that, you know, notification count? The chief said yes. And so we were very concerned, because once the chief said yes, then it triggers charter deadlines that we have to adhere to. And so we wanted to make sure that we were in compliance with the charter deadline for the specific vehicle pursuit recommendation, but also going forward that we had a protocol consistent with the charter for how the chief should notify the board for newly adopted policy and revisions. Now, the city attorney's interpretation of the charter essentially said that we need to, or essentially said that all newly adopted, it's not all newly adopted policies, it's substantial or significant changes to Berkeley police policy or new policies. And so as that is left to the chief's initial discretion about what is substantial or what is significant enough to inform the board that there's been a change. And so we wanted to provide, as a board, guidance, I guess you could call it, a protocol, suggested guidelines for the chief to follow as she's considering whether a policy is significant enough to raise it to our attention. And so the items that we suggested are on page 59, and I'm just going to read them for everyone. The first one is being actively reviewed by the PAB under its policy review powers and duties. And that would be, for example, the vehicle pursuit policy as we were in negotiation. The second is changes, revises, amends, or deletes any policy that BPD and the PAB/PRC previously reviewed within the last 10 years. In order to facilitate that requirement or that suggestion, the director's office would provide a list that would that the chief could use to compare. The third is the result of a substantive change in federal, state, or municipal law. Fourth is requires new training for BPD sworn officers. Fifth is changes, revises, amends, or deletes any language in policy 300 use of force. So anything that fits within those 5 categories, we recommend that the chief notify us at the chief of police report meeting, which to date has been more open-ended and left the department's discretion for what to offer to the board. But we thought that the policy subcommittee thought that the charter actually directed and guided a more affirmative process than what has taken place so far. So with that, I'll open it up to any comments from the board on the proposed guidelines that we would recommend to the chief.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is really an excellent report, and I agree with this protocol. My only question is on the second bullet. Is there some way of making it clear that we're not talking about changing A to the, or, says changes, revises, amends, or deletes any policy that we reviewed over the last 10 years? So it doesn't say anything there about it had to be a substantive.
Yeah, I have the same thought, actually I wrote in the word significantly. Or it could be substantively in front of the word changes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good as long as our understanding of substantive is the same as theirs. But yeah. So I think this is a really good idea.
Wouldn't the fact that all of the policies that rolled over from Lexipol happened in the last 10 years, in essence, mean that any policy changes that were substantive would fall into this category? Into that second category, is that the intention of that category?
Are you talking about category 2?
Right, basically what I'm saying is category 2, because of the blanket changes to Lexipol, umbrellas all policies. Right?
So it wouldn't, because it would only be ones that we have reviewed, like as in we've actively negotiated.
Okay.
And then with this additional limitation that we're discussing, it would be ones that were substantive, so it would actually alter the duties of a Berkeley police officer. That's how I would personally define substantive. I mean, we can include that language in the recommendation if people agree with that language, but that's how I would define substantive.
On the last one, number 5, prioritizing the use of force policy. On one hand, that's good, but I wouldn't want that to substitute for. But since we have this second category, anything that we've actively reviewed in the last 10 years, it would capture a lot of other things that we think are important. So, yeah. I would move that we send this forward to the chief and as our advice for what changes would, suggest the chief send them to us. Not the minor edits.
Before we get a second, I'm just ask if anyone else has more comments.
Have the chief given feedback on this?
That I offered for them to participate preemptively. No, I offered actually, like when we submitted this to them, for them to participate. I think their idea, just based on what Deputy Chief Tate said, is that they'll come back and respond to us once we vote on it.
Okay.
Which,
Yeah, so just to make sure that the scope that you want this to cover is what it covers. My concern, this basically says, to your point, it's not the umbrella of all policies, it's only policies that we've reviewed. Does that not still leave the bucket of PAB never got to this policy because it was fine? And then it gets substantially changed.
So the ones that we would care about that fall in that bucket are ones that are identified affirmatively in the other bullets.
Fair.
So ones that are a result of change in federal state law, ones that require additional training by officers.
That's what the other three bullets are there.
Exactly.
And the other thing to remember is that we do have the authority at any time
Yeah.
to raise a policy, to raise
Right.
issues regarding a policy. This is just for, so just kind of parallel tracks. But the primary concern here was triggering of the 60-day review period and what qualifies, what event needs to happen.
And I think that one about requiring new training is a really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we don't want is for there to be a significant change in policy that we are unaware of. And by unaware of, I don't mean, like tapped on or like left a note in a location that we won't look to check until it's too late.
Yeah.
We want to be told, and we don't want to just be told, we want the public to be told what is being changed, what is substantively being changed in policy. So I think that that's why the charter has this language, and that's why I think we should, recommend these changes.
So process-wise, this should probably sit within the policy subcommittee, right? So we will send it over and then we will hear their response probably in our upcoming meetings and can report back, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would be happy to, or, we can, the policy subcommittee, which is us, right?
Yeah.
Should, ask them for maybe like a little comment at our next meeting on Tuesday on
Because
this.
obviously we want their input.
Yeah.
Right. Because this cannot be something we force upon them. This is a
Right.
request, so we need to have a meeting of the minds about what they think is reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing I'll say is that the charter specifically says the chief should do it. And so, that wasn't our choice, but I think it's helpful where we have a chief of police report for them to report. At that time, so. Okay. Thank you for the conversation. Is there a motion?
There was an
Okay.
I second.
Okay,
With that one change, right, with adding the substantive.
Yeah.
I'm assuming yes.
Yes. Okay.
And just restate for the record, the motion is to accept the proposed policy submission process and forward it to the chief with the understanding that any final version will come back to the board, correct?
Yes, with that one.
And with that understanding, the word
Insertion of the word substantive.
substantive in the second.
With the ends, okay.
Substantively.
Okay, that was a motion by board member Calavita and a second by vice chair Wilson. Let's do quick roll call vote. Board member Calavita,
Yes.
board member Lethwich.
Yes.
Board member Moses.
Yes.
Vice chair Wilson
Yeah.
and chair Calavita.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Next agenda item. We're moving through this. By the way, this is my first special chairman, so any feedback appreciated.
Great job.
No, not right now. 9E, discussion and action on the PAB's review of the BPD's mutual aid agreements with other law enforcement agencies. Give us the director's office.
Okay, so we're bringing, again, it's a continuing discussion about your duties or ability under the charter to review the MOUs. At the last meeting, you voted to amend the standing rules to allow the board to review as opposed to the subcommittee. So in assisting you in that, we reached out to the department to get clarification in the last batch that we received, which is 2018 batch, if that's still the most up to date. I have not heard a response back, but I don't want to put Lieutenant Rigo on the spot. Do you know if the 2018 version of MOUs is the most current one that the department has, or is there another one?
I'm actually not in there.
Okay, so, and I'll follow up with the chief, but I'm working off the list, the 2018 list, which is a document, as you can see, there's 544 pages of MOUs. We pull out the table of contents so you can review that quickly. And that's on pages 63, 64. One of the things we were recommending for this memo is ways that you could approach it. in a way that makes sense to you, and I'll turn it over to our policy analyst to discuss the recommendation there.
Yeah, so again, as we confirm whether or not these are the most updated MOUs, we thought it was important for the board to start strategizing how it is that it wanted to review the MOUs once it decided which ones to review. We provide some suggestions, and they could be either do one of these methods or a mixture of multiple. Or none. That's also an option. To review them either in chronological order. It would be a review of agreements from oldest to newest, just to identify the most outdated provisions and ensure there's consistency with current policy. There's the geographic proximity approach, which is to start with the agreements involving nearby jurisdiction before expanding to regional, state, or federal partnerships with other agencies. There's the ones in terms of operational, taking consideration of operational significance, prioritizing agreements based on their frequency of activation or direct impact on Berkeley residents. Then there's the approach of, which is the opposite of the first one, in my opinion, is reviewing whatever is recent or pending updates. So just focusing on agreements that are up for renewal or modification to provide timely input before the renegotiation. And then, of course, there's the type of agreement. We could approach this by grouping the agreements into categories such as emergency response, whether it's tactical assistance, joint investigations, and so forth. So again, we bring these forward as options for you. You could adopt one or a mix or none as the director pointed. We just want to make sure that as we build up to this task, that we have a methodology and an approach so that we as staff can start supporting you in that work.
And if I'll add a note again, I made the recommendation before that you may consider working with jurisdictions that are adjacent to you and that have oversight programs and sort of work with them, let them get their feedback or provide feedback to you. So vehicle pursuit is the one that I think comes to mind. Oakland has had a recent discussion on vehicle pursuits, so potentially tapping into their oversight board and saying, hey, what do you think about the MOU we have as it relates to this practice or policy, and kind of also building your momentum and engagement with practitioners and colleagues in this field.
Can I ask what the process is for these agreements? Is it between the city councils or the whatever governing body? What's the process, if you know?
I don't know. I'd like to defer to Lieutenant Rigo. I know you said you don't have familiarity with the 2018, but do you know how the sausage is made with MOUs?
I sure don't. I haven't had experience with the MOU process,
Okay.
so.
But I thought, thank you for the memo. I thought I wouldn't do chronological order. But I think all of these are important, but personally, I think operational significance, recent or pending updates and geographic proximity. But, you know, other than, I wouldn't go back in chronological order. That's the only one I wouldn't do, but other than that, those are all important.
Thoughts?
I agree, operational significance seems to be the most important, followed by recent or pending updates.
I don't think we should review any that are expired. So if they have end dates on them and they're expired, I don't think we should review them.
Do they expire? Do we know?
I don't know. I've seen some, they do have, some I've seen have term dates. I guess I fundamentally don't know what we're looking for when we review them, and so I'm challenged by this. This is a really perfect project for the use of AI. Are these public documents?
Yes. Yeah.
Because in a way I could say, like, feed them into AI and come up with some common themes or categories. Like, we have to know where to start with this review. And that's what one issue I know that's been raised by the city auditor is cost recovery. Where the MOU is about us providing services. to another entity or to a private business or whatever. So I don't know. I guess I would say, I don't think we should review anything that's expired. I'm open to whatever other criteria the board wants to elevate. I would love to see some way of having, an automated review of even all of them, all 744 pages, to say like, what are the standard provisions, if any? These are the sections. You know, there's questions that we could feed into the tool. So that is, those are my thoughts.
What does the charter require from us today? Or the standing rules, sorry, the standing rules.
You have satisfied the standing rule requirements, which, by your first meeting in February to, well, establish a subcommittee, but, now you have amended it to have the full board. So, the ball is rolling. Is there any further timeline beyond that?
No, there's no further timelines. Again, we bring these recommendations sort of to just get ahead and make sure that we have the ball rolling. But if the board isn't ready to take any action today, no action is necessary.
And so the standing rules require we annually review whether the mutual agreement should be examined. It doesn't require us to affirmatively.
Correct.
So, one thing that I want to keep in mind is that the first level review would likely be done by staff. And I don't want to be allocating so many resources to, you know, look at all 540 pages if we're not expressly interested in them. I think that you guys are really busy right now, so I'm conscious of that. I will say though, that the one that stands out to me is the immigration and enforcement MOU. And I know that, you know, the mayor's convening a working group on, you know, ensuring that everything is, that we are in fact a sanctuary city. And I think that it would be very good for this board to weigh in as best as it could. And since we do have charter authority to review MOUs, and since I see listed some of the MOUs do relate to immigration enforcement, I think that we should at least as a full board look at that and make a recommendation based on our review of that, even if it is as simple as we have reviewed it and we agree that this is you know, this fits the qualification or fits the standard for a sanctuary city. That would be my recommendation for a more narrow review this time around. I think it's timely.
I like that idea.
That's fine with me.
Could we also have staff just give a little more information about the process? And also inquire about any upcoming extensions, or just generally, do they have expiration dates? Do they need to be extended? And then maybe the focus on the immigration related.
And just to clarify, the process of how these are created, or?
And or amended? Is it the governing body of each jurisdiction? I mean, yeah, what's the process?
And I don't know if they all have expiration date, but I know that even from the Berkeley UCPD website, they indicate that the Berkeley PD and the UCPD sign their MOUs every year. So I mean, there's some of these that receive annual review, but others there's a few of them that are decades old. So
The one with UC also I'd be very curious about, because when I did my ride along, I got the sense that there's some tension there between, you know, over jurisdiction, and it's not that clear, and some, you know, tension between the entities. So I'd be curious about that, just because they are right here.
We did have an issue with that one, with one of the complaints.
Right.
It was because they were
The
saying,
noise, right?
well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I've heard 3 suggestions, and I think all of them are doable by staff, but correct me if I'm wrong. The first is for a 1-pager or a 2-pager on the process, how the sausage is made, as the director put it. Second is what Vice Chair Wilson said, with sort of like standard language, just like an example sheet.
Well, really, I'm asking, we can ask the chair during our check-ins, like, do you I don't know what City of Berkeley is doing. I can imagine based on other things I've seen that we're not on the cutting edge of adoption of new technologies, but to the extent that these are public records, I would love to see us trying to use some technology to help facilitate the development of a recommended approach to reviewing these MOUs, which to me would include having a tool review all of them and then help us come up with key categories and areas of potential focus.
That's the second item. And then the third one was the targeted substantive review of the immigration MOUs and the use MOU. Does that sound like a fair summary?
Yes.
Okay, there's not really an action that we need to take since, right?
Yeah, and also can we, I mean, I don't know what you mean by prioritizing the immigration ones, but I would be really interested in seeing these ones with the Department of Homeland Security. Like, I want to see what those MOUs look like,
Sure.
so we need to get copies of those.
Yeah, let's get copies and I have a little summary from staff and we'll agendize it in the future meeting.
But when we give more tasks to staff, I wonder if we should try to come up with priorities because they already have so much work. Should we assign is it helpful to you for to have more input about where you should place this on the list of many things you already have, or should we leave it to you?
Do you want a liaison, I guess, as well?
Yeah, that'd be helpful. And just trying to conceptualize the logistics of some of these things. In what form we have that we'll use, if we want to do the machine learning, we just got to do a lot of prep work on the back end. So yeah, if I can have some time and meet with staff and then we'll get back to you.
Sounds good.
Is anyone interested in being a liaison on this particular MOU? I also am happy to come back to it at our next staff, like I'm envisioning a staffing meeting at our next meeting where we review the subcommittees and et cetera.
But we could also, you and I could be the liaisons at least initially, because we're already meeting with the chair every week.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
I'll just add one notable absence from this, and maybe it's because it's 2018, is I don't see the MOU with the alternative co-response provider.
Good
What
point.
is that?
The SCUs.
Oh,
Right. Well, not the SCU, but the alternative, the SCU is currently being utilized
Oh,
Right.
you mean within the department?
within the department, exactly, right, which is the co-responsible, correct, what's the name of that?
But you don't need an MOU for an internal.
It's part of the department.
Oh, is that right? I thought it was a third party that.
It's a third party that we work very closely with.
Oh, it is.
It is a third party.
So the SCU.
No, not SU, the one that.
The mobile crisis.
Mobile
That's it.
crisis.
Mobile crisis or HHCS.
Oh, that is, you're right, another city agency.
The city agency.
Hmm. Okay. Thanks for flagging. Okay,
Where can these MOUs be found? Copies of them,
We circulate a link or we can send it again.
yeah,
And I'm just looking in real time, the initial one, there's a few immigration ones, but the initial one with ICE was April 20th, 2010, and the current one, is March 14th, 2017.
did you send the link around?
We can do that.
okay. Moving on. To agenda item 10, public comment. I'll give it to the director.
All right, I'll take on from here, Chair Cayetano. Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comment. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. I'll start with those physically present here first before moving on to our virtual attendees. With that said, is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll move on to our virtual attendees. Again, please use the raise hand icon or *9 if you'd like to provide public comment and you're attending virtually. Okay, Again, if you'd like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand icon or *9 if you're calling in, so that we may acknowledge you. Chair, at this time, there are no hands raised.
Thank you, Jose. We're going to go to agenda item 11, closed session.
Okay, for those attending virtually, we'll now be going in closed session. The webinar will remain open, but audio and video recording will stop. We'll be returning to announce closed session actions.
Welcome back. The board approved the director's recommendation to administratively close one matter, and we didn't take any further action. So with that, I'd like to
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
hearing no objections, done.